There are people who don't hate the world. They just feel heavy in it. They don't dislike others. But being surrounded by too many voices feels like walking through a storm with no umbrella. Loud, disorienting, and draining. You'll see them at the edge of the room, hands wrapped around a cup, eyes scanning the exits. You'll hear them say, "Maybe next time," with a quiet tone that hides a war between longing and self-preservation. They're not trying to be distant. They're trying to stay whole. In a world that celebrates the loudest voice, they speak softly, if at all. And when they do, they choose their words like someone selecting stones to cross a river. Carefully, intentionally. Social avoidance is misunderstood. It's labeled as rude, standoffish, cold. But what if it's none of those things? What if it's just a different way of breathing? For some people, solitude isn't a prison. It's a sanctuary. They're not broken. They're sensitive in a world that moves too fast, too loudly, too often without meaning. And yet, their hearts are full. They feel deeply. So deeply, in fact, that every glance, every tone, every unfinished sentence echoes inside them long after a room has emptied. They don't hate connection. They crave it, but not the kind that schemes the surface. They want the kind that lingers in the soul. This is where our story begins. Not with avoidance, but with awareness. With the quiet truth behind the choice to say no when the world expects yes. With a psychology not of fear, but of preservation. Let's step into the mind of those who avoid the crowd. Not because they don't care, but because they care more than most. The quiet battle. They see the message light up their phone. A party, a dinner, a get-together. And for a moment, they pause. Not because they're unsure of the sender, but because they're unsure of themselves. There's a flicker of excitement, a vision of warm laughter, dim lights, easy conversation. But just as quickly, a shadow follows. The anticipation of fatigue, the mental rehearsing of what to say, the tension of navigating energy that doesn't feel safe. They want to say yes. Truly. They wish they could be the kind of person who jumps up, who throws on something casual and shows up smiling. But their yes doesn't come easily. It drags behind questions. How long will I have to stay? Will there be someone I can actually talk to? Can I leave early without looking rude? This is the inner conflict few see. It's not about flakiness or selfishness. It's the struggle between desire and capacity, between the wish to connect and the fear of depletion. And then comes the guilt, because if they say no, they'll wonder if they're disappointing someone, if they're pushing people away without meaning to, if one more declined invitation is one step closer to being forgotten. But if they say yes, they risk showing up as half of themselves, smiling, nodding, laughing when needed, but secretly counting down the minutes until it's socially acceptable to leave. This isn't just about being introverted. It's about emotional bandwidth, about the reality that some minds process the world more deeply, and therefore, tire faster. This is the quiet battle behind a simple reply. It's not laziness. It's emotional cost-benefit analysis. And most of the time, the cost is higher than anyone realizes. The science of sensitivity. To understand why some people avoid social events, we have to move beyond labels like antisocial or shy. The truth lies deeper, in the body, the brain, the nervous system. Psychologists have a term for it. High sensory processing sensitivity means the brain processes everything more. Not just louder sounds or brighter lights, but emotions, expressions, tension in the air. For people with this trait, A single social interaction can feel like opening 10 browser tabs all at once. Each conversation, each facial cue, each unspoken feeling is being downloaded, analyzed, stored, often without them realizing it. Their mirror neurons, the parts of the brain that pick up on others' emotions, are more active. They don't just hear what someone says. They feel how it was said. They notice the smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the voice that dips when something's off, the pause that means more than words. And all of this adds up, where others leave a gathering feeling energized. They leave overstimulated, buzzing, tired in their bones. Not because anything bad happened, but because their brain simply doesn't know how to turn off the faucet of input. This isn't a flaw. It's actually a form of emotional intelligence. But like any strength, it has its edge. When unprotected, it leads to burnout, anxiety, even guilt. So they retreat, not to isolate, but to recover. To the outside world, that looks like avoidance. But to the sensitive brain, it's survival. Understanding this is key, because it shifts the story. From "why are they like this?" to "how can we make space for them to feel safe enough to stay?" Social avoidance isn't just psychological. It's biological. And it's real. Craving connection, needing distance. Here's the paradox. The very people who avoid social events are often the ones who yearn most deeply for human connection. They want closeness. They want to feel understood. They long for eye contact that says, "I see you." For conversations that don't skim the surface but dive into something real. And yet, they stay home. They cancel plans. They scroll through photos of the party they skipped. Hearts pulled in two directions, longing and relief, because what they fear is not people. It's the performance that often comes with being around them. The pressure to smile when they're tired. The expectation to be on, to laugh, engage, respond. Even when their emotional tank is empty, they're not afraid of talking. They're afraid of talking without meaning. Small talk feels like static to them, a noise that takes up space but says very little. They crave depth. And most social events aren't designed for depth. They're built for brightness, speed, momentum. So they protect their energy by withdrawing from environments that require them to fragment, to present only the version of themselves that fits neatly into the room. This is the emotional paradox, wanting to be close, but needing to protect the self that connection often demands they mask. People say, you just need to put yourself out there. But they already have, too many times, in ways no one noticed. Because when someone shows up half-present, it doesn't mean they don't care. It means they gave what they could. The paradox isn't about not wanting to belong. It's about not wanting to lose themselves in the process. Where it all begins. Avoidance doesn't start in adulthood. It's not a sudden decision. It's a slow shaping, a learned response forged in rooms where someone never felt fully safe. Maybe it began in childhood. A child who was told, "You're too sensitive." A teenager who spoke and was talked over. A quiet soul born into a loud home, where volume meant attention, and stillness was mistaken for invisibility. Over time, the mind builds patterns. It's easier not to speak. It's safer to observe. I'll be accepted if I don't take up too much space. These beliefs aren't just thoughts. They become emotional reflexes, triggered every time the body remembers how it felt to be unseen, unheard, or misunderstood. And sometimes, it's not the family. Sometimes it's the classroom, where they raised their hand and got laughed at. The lunch table where no one made room. The friend group where they always felt slightly offbeat. Moments like these don't vanish. They settle in the nervous system. And decades later, when invited to a gathering, that same nervous system sends out the quiet alarm. Danger. Remember last time? Stay home. It's safer. Even evolution has something to say. We're wired for belonging. In ancient tribes, rejection meant death. So our bodies still respond to social risk with the same intensity as physical danger. Heart rate rises. Muscles tighten. The brain goes into surveillance mode. Do I fit in here? Am I safe? And for those who feel more, who sense more, that system never really turns off. Avoidance isn't weakness. It's a trauma-informed shield. A quiet kind of armor forged by experience. Worn not for battle, but for protection. The return of the quiet soul. People who avoid social events are not broken. They are simply trying to navigate a world that often demands too much from their nervous system. Too quickly, too loudly. But here's the quiet truth. They are not rejecting connection. They are waiting for it to feel real. They crave eye contact, not attention, depth, not drama, moments of stillness, where nothing needs to be said, because everything is already understood. They build worlds in their solitude, rich inner landscapes of thought, emotion, imagination, and while others network, they reflect. While others chase crowds, they sit with presence. Yet eventually, they return, not because they're fixed, but because they've remembered who they are. They walk into the room differently now, no longer trying to blend in, no longer shrinking to fit a mold. They arrive grounded, whole, present, not performing. And when they speak, people listen, because their words are never wasted. They speak only when it means something, and that meaning cuts through the noise like truth often does. In a world obsessed with visibility, they are a reminder. Presence isn't always loud. Sometimes it's felt more than seen. So, if you know someone like this, don't take their absence personally. Their no is not rejection. It's regulation. They are not saying, I don't want to be there. They're saying, I want to be there fully, and right now I can't. And if you are someone like this is your permission to honor your rhythm, to choose stillness, to wait for what feels real. Because when you finally do show up, you bring a kind of presence that doesn't ask for attention. It gives it. And that, in a noisy world, is a rare kind of power. The wisdom in withdrawal. We live in a world that celebrates the bold, the loud, the visible. Charisma is currency, and presence is often measured by volume. So when someone prefers silence, they're misunderstood. They're told to open up, to come out of their shell, to stop being so distant. But what if that shell is a sanctuary? What if their quiet is not a lack, but a form of wisdom? People who avoid social events aren't empty. They're full of emotion, observation, and empathy that runs deep. They feel more in 5 minutes than others do in an hour. They notice what goes unspoken, the energy in a room, the shift in someone's tone, the way a person's eyes dim before their lips say, I'm fine. Their retreat isn't rejection, it's regulation. And within that solitude, something beautiful happens. They reflect, they create, they process life in detail, turning moments into meaning. These are the people who remember your favorite song, who check in after the noise has faded, who show up when it truly matters. Because for them, connection isn't about being everywhere. It's about being real where they choose to be. They don't scatter their attention. They offer it like a gift. Undivided, present, true. They are deep wells in a world of puddles. And yes, that depth can isolate, but it also anchors. They may not charm a crowd, but they change lives in one-on-one conversations. They listen in a way that makes people feel safe, heard, seen. What society calls avoidance may actually be emotional intelligence in motion. It's not that they're running from the world. It's that they're waiting for something real enough to walk toward. Connection without self-erasure. Healing doesn't mean becoming someone else. It doesn't mean forcing yourself into every invitation or pretending that noise no longer hurts. Healing, for the socially avoidant, begins with permission. The permission to honor their sensitivity without shame. The permission to say no without guilt. And more importantly, the permission to redefine what connection looks like. It can start small. A one-on-one coffee with someone who doesn't drain you. A walk with a friend who understands silence. An online group that shares your passions, where you're free to show up as you are. No masks, no pretending. Therapists use a concept called graded exposure, not to force people into discomfort, but to stretch their nervous system gently, teaching it that not all connection is unsafe. Maybe you go to the gathering, but just for 20 minutes. Maybe you take breaks in a quiet room. Maybe you arrive late and leave early, not out of disrespect, but out of emotional respect for your own system. And breath, slow, grounded breath, becomes your anchor, because the body doesn't respond to logic. It responds to safety. Grounding techniques like touching something textured, naming 5 things you can see, or silently repeating a mantra like, "I am allowed to take up space without performing," can shift the entire experience. The goal isn't to eliminate avoidance. It's to give it language, awareness, choice. To slowly rewrite the story from, "I can't handle this," to, "I can show up in ways that don't cost my soul." Healing doesn't mean you'll love every social space. It means you'll learn which ones are worth your energy and how to protect your peace while being present.